Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the podcast. We're continuing our run through of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and we are up to the episode that is called The Wire. It is the 22nd episode of the second season, aired first on May 8th, 1994. It was written by Robert Hewitt Wolfe, directed by Kim Friedman. This is the first female director that the series has ever had. And in this episode, Bashir tries to help when Garak suffers painful headaches because of an implant in his brain. It's called The Wire. We're joined by Clay. Clay, how are you?
Shit.
I was trying to think of a more iconic... my favorite Wire quote is actually, deserve ain't got nothing to do with it, or deserve ain't got shit to do with it, whatever. But I can't remember what that character says. The girl who's Marlo's number one lieutenant or something at the last season.
Oh, yeah. I was going to try and figure out a way to work in the phrase... I was going to say something like Garak's biggest problem is that he forgot that if you come at the king, you best not miss.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if that entirely made sense. So.
It sort of does. We're talking about the Star Trek episode The Wire, which is unhelpfully very similarly named to a critically acclaimed HBO show. This is a Garak-centric episode. We learn a lot about Garak. So we're going to play an audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back, and we're going to break down The Wire.
You mean when you had that shuttle shot down to stop those prisoners from escaping?
I stopped them. I only wish that I had stopped them.
You didn't.
No, Doctor. My disgrace is worse than that. Unimaginably worse.
What could you have possibly done worse than that?
I let them go. It was the eve of the Cardassian withdrawal. Elam and I were interrogating 5 Bajorans. They were children, Doctor. None of them were older than 14 years old. They knew nothing. They lived in bombed-out rooms, scrounged for food on the streets. They were filthy and they stank. The room was freezing cold. The air was like ice, and suddenly the whole exercise seemed utterly meaningless. All I wanted was a hot bath and a good meal. So I let them go. I gave them whatever latinum I had in my pockets and opened the door and flung them back into the streets. Elam couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at me as if I were insane.
You took pity on those children. There's nothing wrong with that.
No! I was a fool! I should have completed my interrogation and turned them over to the troops for execution. But because I was chilly and my stomach was growling, I failed in my duty and destroyed everything I had worked for.
And so they exiled you.
That's right! And left me to live out my days with nothing to look forward to but having lunch with you.
I'm sorry you feel that way. I thought you enjoyed my company.
Oh, I did. And that's the worst part. I can't believe that I actually enjoyed eating mediocre food and staring into your smug, sanctimonious face. I hate this place. And I hate you.
Okay, Garak. That's your prerogative. Now I really think you should lie down.
Get away from me!
Garak!
All right, Clay. So, I'm actually interested to hear what you thought before I say anything about this episode, because I think that this one is an episode that's really open to a lot of perspectives, I think, about whether people like it or not, and it has a variety of opinions about whether or not it's good. But why don't you lead us off here? Open up this one.
Okay. Well, I thought it was good, but I felt a couple things. I felt, while I liked the character stuff and the interaction between Bashir and Garak, I felt ultimately that this story was a little bit... this felt a bit like a filler episode. Like it you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like the only real purpose of this episode was to introduce the concept of the Obsidian Order or whatever they're called.
Yep.
And after that, the story that Garak gets into, I thought started off good, but then just got so convoluted. And I was like, by the time he gives his last bit of confession there, which hilariously, Bashir says what I was thinking, which was like, you're going to tell me that I need to know the truth again?
Yeah.
By the time he did that, I was like, I don't know, like, what is going on here? And then to have him at the end, it turns out that he's been lying, but like the lies, he doesn't know which ones are it just, at first I was like, so what was the point of all this? And then on the second hand, I was like, well, is that confusion part of the point, which I can kind of understand, but I don't know. It felt ultimately like a fairly unsatisfying episode for me. Like I thought it had good potential. It felt in some places like they were kind of doing like a reverse duet a little bit.
Yeah.
But by the end, I was like, I don't even really know what the point of this was, aside from setting up the Obsidian Order, or was it the Obsidian Order?
Obsidian Order, yeah. That's like the Cardassian CIA, basically.
Yeah, like by the end, I was like, so what? Once Garak shows back up and he's like, no, everything's fine. Nothing happened to me. And we're just going to forget everything we talked about, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't find it very fulfilling. Which I looked it up afterwards, and it's actually a very highly rated episode. It's like an 8-something.
It is.
I was very surprised by.
It is. A couple of the reviewers that I read consider this to be like one of the top 3 episodes so far.
Really?
Yeah. And I was kind of leading you into it because I think if you are familiar with this show and you're doing like a retroactive review of it, this is a very, very good episode. I think if you are new to the series or you are watching it for the first time, I think it's incredibly underwhelming in a lot of ways. And it's an episode and it's a character that really work well on rewatch, I think. And it doesn't really make sense on your first time through. To me, your first time through is basically like Batman The Dark Knight, where the Joker tells his origin story 3 different ways. And you don't really get an ending to that story in Batman. Like if the movie just stopped after the 3rd time he told the story about where he got his scars from, and you're like, well, what was the point of that? Like, why did that happen? This is very similar to that in that you spend a whole 45 minutes with the character, and then you end up at the end not really knowing if anything that happened was true or not. Mm-hmm. And you're right that it introduces the Obsidian Order, which is important. It introduces an Albertine, which is important. And it does more than any previous episode it had ever done to flesh out the character of Garak, who, despite the fact that he's only been in like 2 or 3 episodes so far, is an extremely, extremely important supporting character as the show goes forward. So I guess because I was watching it feeling similarly unsatisfied. It's obviously a bottle show because it's basically Bashir and Garak in a room together for 40 minutes.
Right.
And it doesn't really... It's interesting on a symbolic level more than it is an actual cut and dry episodic story level. And I'm wondering do you think that this episode suffers from being too much of world building at the expense of telling a single cohesive story?
I don't know. I think the story is not really too disjointed. Like I think it is a fairly cohesive story.
Sure. Do you think that the story has enough of a reason to be told, I guess would be?
That is a little bit more suspect for me, I think. Like I get what they're doing for Garak's character here. But I don't know. I guess I'm just the point that they end up at the end. I feel like Bashir hasn't really changed too much. Like the whole situation feels like it just has come back to where it was before, and their relationship hasn't really changed that much, even though Bashir kind of like calls him on it.
Yep. Bashir knows a bit more at that point.
Yeah, they do kind of set that up at the beginning with the concept of the repetitive epic, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But But yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess I don't really know how I feel about it. Because, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing here is that you had mentioned in a previous episode that you were wondering how much we actually know about the Cardassians. And very importantly, I think this episode fleshes out the Cardassians quite a bit. They continue to sort of be the James Bond villain, is how I describe them, as the pleasant to your face while being brutal behind the scenes personality. Right. And they are constant liars. The society itself is basically a fascist dictatorship, where we learned before in the Maquis that trials are predetermined. You know what the outcome is in a trial on Cardassia. We learn about the Obsidian Order, which is their version of the CIA, or the Gestapo, I guess would be a better analogy, where they are watching over their citizens. You never know to what degree this is actually true, because most of the information you hear about the Obsidian Order is told from characters who kind of treat it like it's a legendary organization. Mm-hmm. And you get a creeping sense into the fact that Deep Space Nine is very, very interested in fascist governments and fascist characters. Odo expresses a lot of admiration for the Obsidian Order in this episode. He is illegally wiretapping Quark's bar, basically. He gets called out on it, and he says it's for the security of the station and everything like that. And Albertane is, sort of, he's retired but still involved in this government. He can sort of pull strings that allows Bashir to visit him in the first place at the very end.
I thought that was kind of interesting, because I feel like he just went to the Cardassian homeworld, right?
I don't think it's clear. I think what he does is he goes into Cardassian space, but Garak before that had mentioned that he had retired to some colony. So I don't think he goes to the homeworld. Okay. I think he goes to some other planet.
Because I was going to say, I feel like Bashir just taking a ship to Cardassian homeworld is kind of a big deal.
This is the first episode that calls it Cardassia Prime too, which becomes like the name for it. But yeah, he does. I think he just goes to some planet that's not Cardassia Prime, and I think the biggest turn in the episode is actually the end, where Bashir meets this guy in Albertane, and Tane offers to help, but only because he wants Garak to continue to suffer on Deep Space Nine. And I think that maybe while the plot of the episode is not particularly interesting, Garak's state of mind and Garak's unhappiness at being on Deep Space Nine is something that the show had never gone into before. He's basically only allowed to not go insane because he has this thing that pumps endorphins into his head when he gets into an unpleasant situation. So him being on Deep Space Nine, in this episode, you get a sort of a real glimpse of his character, which is when the thing breaks down and he starts yelling at Bashir in the quarters, and he's not being drugged up to be pleasant all the time.
Right.
And that's my favorite scene of the episode, followed by the Albert Tane stuff, where Tane admits that he just wants Garak to suffer, and he will do anything that will prolong his life as long as he realizes he's never allowed to come back home to Cardassia.
Yeah, I think for me, watching it the first time, I just felt like Bashir the whole episode. Like, he was really voicing a lot of my thoughts about what was going on. Like, especially at the end, like as I was writing notes, he said a line that I just like underlined, where he says, "I forgive you for whatever it is that you did." Like, it's so jumbled up that it's very hard to parse out like what he's even telling you.
Yep.
And why he's even doing it. And I understand that's probably part of it. And so I guess I can definitely see why on first view it might come off a little bit underwhelming. But yeah, I mean, it's a good, I guess this episode is really, it's just a character study more than anything else, really.
Yeah, it is.
Because even I guess because the thing that was throwing me off at the end was like, well, what I couldn't figure out why Garak was telling any of this stuff. Like, why does he keep lying about? Like, is his goal to get the thing taken out of his head? Is that part of the point? Is that you're supposed to be confused as to what Garak's motivations are here? Because the thing is obviously fucking with his brain, right?
Well,
is that, I assume?
I don't get the impression that he's being manipulated outside of the fact that it's making him happy, the little wire in his head or whatever.
No, I not manipulating him, but like it is actively deteriorating, and so it is killing him.
Yes,
correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So is everything he's doing just for the purpose of getting Bashir to remove it, or is he actually having a breakdown, which is causing him to like blur the line between what is true and what isn't, and confession and lying, or is like, if it's just breaking down, why didn't he just go to Bashir and be like, "Yo, this thing's gonna kill me. Can you help me?" You know, I was a little bit gray on why he was acting the way he was acting, outside of the fact that this thing is breaking down and is fucking with his head.
Yeah. I mean,
and if that's it, that's fine. That's fine.
I guess how would I think about this? I think that what he's doing is he doesn't want to die. So that's his, I guess that's his like primary motivation, which isn't particularly character specific or anything, but he wants to continue on. He wants to get home. And the thing that you mentioned, the epic, the repetitive epic that they're talking about at the start of the story. Mm-hmm. So what that is Garak explains it as the finest literature that Cardassia has ever produced is this story where someone serves the state to their death. They die, and then they basically tell that story 7 times over through 7 generations of people. It's just the same story over and over again. It is very propagandistic. It's very fascist. It's very much and Garak has said this before about how the state is the most important thing to Cardassians. Mm-hmm. And the episode is saying that Garak is actually a good soldier for the Cardassians here. Right. He is, while he's been somewhat humanized from his trip over to DS9, he constantly insults Bashir's help as being smug Federation values and stuff. He has that scene where he's arguing with Bashir, and he says that the worst part of our lunches together is that I kind of enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And what they're saying here is that his Cardassian programming mixed with his personality is just making it very difficult for him to not want to return home and to be frustrated with Deep Space Nine on some level, but at the same time that he's learning how to be independent of home and sort of seeing the Cardassian government for what it is on some level. We watched that recent episode where he sort of had gotten into a back and forth with Dukat about something, and you realize that they don't like each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really it. Beyond the characterization of Garak always lies. Like, that's just part of his character. He doesn't tell the truth, and Tane says it in this episode. Whenever you could just say something simple, Garak would lie, or whatever that quote is at the very end of it. So it sounds to me that you found it was more frustrating than anything, and me sort of knowing that the outcome is that this is all lies, it kind of relieves the feeling of wondering where the episode is going on some level.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of watching it for the first time. You are watching it from Bashir's point of view, which makes it very frustrating.
Yes.
But thinking about it and probably going back on it again, it's clearer that he's having a massive crisis of conscience, so to speak.
Yep. Do you think that any of the Garak stories that he tells are true? Is it like a mixture of truth, not of truth, or is he just making things up whole cloth?
Oh, I think they have to be some true. There's got to be some truth there. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yep.
Like, there's no point in having him tell those stories and get so passionate about it just for them all to be lies. I mean, it's just like, even if they were all lies, that doesn't make him a very interesting character.
Yeah. So what? All of his stories are basically him saying that he was doing something and this other character, Elam, is doing something the opposite, and they kind of clashed with each other. Like, to me, the Garak stories that he's telling are really just kind of weaving the potential reason for why he was exiled from Cardassia, because it seems clear that he did something, that he had some kind of crisis of conscience at some point. Mm-hmm. And he didn't do what the Cardassian thing to do would be, and he kind of resents himself for doing it at the same time. Like, he cost himself his happiness, even though he feels he did the right thing, and he has that the best story is when he's getting to that angry argument. He talks about the Bajoran children that they were interrogating, and he let them go simply because he was hungry and he wanted to eat. It was not because he felt bad for them, but it was that moment of weakness from the Cardassian point of view that led him to be exiled. Even if that's not the truth, it's just indicating he fucked up somewhere, and he's in conflict with himself about where he went wrong and whether or not doing the thing that he did was the quote-unquote right thing to do at the time.
Yeah, that story in particular is the one that I felt like is probably the most true. I would say maybe not necessarily the outcome of it, but the actual action that he took, I would say, is probably true.
Yeah.
Same with the one about blowing up the ship. I would say that is probably also true. Whether or not he kills his friend or whatever, is that what he said? His friend was, his quote unquote friend was in the ship that he blows up in that first story, right?
Yes, and his friend is just his first name.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether that story is true, I would say probably some of that story is true. Even, I mean, I found the first name thing weird.
Oh, really?
Like,
I was worried, yeah.
I don't know if I would say I was disappointed, but it's like Bashir is doing all this research and he doesn't even know the dude's first name.
Yeah, I would have changed that line to have been like that was his Obsidian Order code name or something.
Yeah, or like his mother's name or something.
Yeah, maybe
something a little just a little bit more obtuse instead of like this person Richard that's actually just his first name.
Right.
But yeah, it is a really interesting character study. And especially, you know, I enjoyed it. I recognized it as being important once we started the next one, and he was in it again so quickly.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I totally realized how much he was going to be showing up. So the fact that he is a fairly recurring character makes it work, I think, much better than if it had just been some one-off. I think, I think that's part of it too. Is at the end of it, everything does go back to normal so quickly.
You're talking about the Bashir, like when him and Bashir are eating lunch or whatever.
Yeah, they have that last scene, and Garak's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's fine. Could have been a lie, could have been truth. Even the lies are truths, and sometimes the truths are lies or whatever.
Yep.
And Bashir is just like, oh, you. Like at that point, that felt more like a TNG kind of thing, where it's like, well, we have to reset these characters at the end so we can, don't have to deal with this next week. So I guess I'm a little bit surprised that they don't have something linger there, or have the relationship change in some way. And maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure how they handle those two after this, but maybe they do change it a bit.
I mean, I would have written into that ending scene a little bit more of Bashir sort of dropping hints to Garak that because he visited Tain, he knows something about him. Garak tends to respond well to new information against him anyway. He's never particularly caught off guard by accusations and people learning things about him. That's part of his character. But I would have just had like you're saying, maybe just make Bashir a little bit more suspicious or unsure of what's going on at the end.
I was just going to say, well, even more so in the rest of the episode, honestly, because I know part of the thing is that he considers them friends, but Garak is like, dude, we only see each other once a week. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, et cetera, et cetera. But at no point does Bashir say, like, I think he might be kind of full of shit here. Like, there's no point where he doesn't just accept everything that he's saying as truth.
Yeah.
Until the end when he's told, yeah, you probably shouldn't accept everything he's saying as truth. So Bashir comes off kind of naive here.
Interesting, yeah.
And I don't know. It might have been a little bit more interesting for me if Bashir had... It's tough because... Again, you're watching it for the first time. You're just kind of along for the ride, and they are kind of playing with your expectations a little bit because usually these episodes, much like the way they do in Duet, it's all about getting the confession out of this guy who delivers a really intense monologue about the horrible thing that he's done, while the character whose name is in the credits just stands there and watches. And then at the end, they kind of go, wow, that was crazy. But, real life is complicated, and then something kind of ironic or darkly ironic happens at the end, and you everybody looks at each other, and then the music swells, and they go to the credits. So I think they're playing with your expectations that it's going to play out like that, and subverting that. They're subverting it without Bashir really engaging in what is being said,
Yeah. They also do the grand speech in the middle of the episode as opposed to the end of it.
Right.
Garak
and honestly, I thought, up until I saw what they were doing, how they were purposely making it convoluted when he does that like addendum in the infirmary or in sickbay when he's like, you have to know the truth again. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. You gotta know when to George Costanza it and get out of there,
Yeah.
But by the end, I was like, okay, so this is purposely supposed to be convoluted and kind of hard to follow intentionally. But yeah, on the first watch, you're just kind of like, this is just keeps going.
I think that the Garak in sickbay after he has his breakdown is the most obvious. We need Garak to say something here to inspire Bashir to go off and find the truth. At that point, I don't really understand why Garak is talking anymore. And he's kind of reverted back to his normal pleasant Garakness as opposed to the angry Garakness. That to me feels more natural with his implant being removed, unless they're saying that he's got over it cold turkey or whatever. But that one felt... That one, I agree, feels excessive. It's like it's unnecessary for Garak to reveal something else at that point. It feels like it's poorly timed, and maybe Bashir should have flashed back to an earlier conversation that they had, and he realized that that's the hint that Garak was saying to go find Tane, because the drive to find Tane is ostensibly about getting these proteins or whatever that Bashir needs, but it's really just the episode needs you to meet this character more than anything.
Right.
And
so he hasn't shown up before?
What's that?
He hasn't shown up before?
No, this is the first time he's appeared, but he will be back in a bunch of episodes. Mm-hmm. So that's to me, like, when I watched I had to be reminded. I was looking at like a write-up of it, and I was like, oh, he does. He actually goes for proteins and stuff, because when you're watching it, it kind of just feels like he's going to go find the answer for the story. Like Bashir's going to find the answer for the episode and bring it back to the audience.
Yeah, it seems like his quest there is to figure out, to find some sort of redemption for Garak or something, which obviously doesn't happen.
How to wrap up the story, almost. It's it's just this is the ultimate solution here. And he doesn't really even spend all that much time with him. It's funny. I was actually
surprised at the point where he goes off. I was like, oh, this is gonna keep going. There was like 10 minutes left in the episode. I was surprised I thought it was at that point. It seemed like they were wrapping everything up, but
yeah. I would have actually fixed the pacing and maybe done... I feel like the episode's kind of backloaded. I would have... The opening is kind of slow, the first half of it. Like until Garak has his breakdown, I know that they're trying to build that up and everything, but I feel the pacing improves after that happens and you meet Tane and all that stuff. But the Garak and Bashir thing is funny. Like we had mentioned in the previous episode about whether or not you can see Bashir as sort of the Roddenberry-esque viewpoint of the universe. Like he's the person that brings in the sort of, you called it naive. I wouldn't disagree that he's a little bit naive, but he's the eternal optimist. He doesn't care what Garak has done. He doesn't care that Garak might have killed hundreds of thousands of people or whatever. He's just trying to help him in this situation. That's a very TNG aspect of it. And DS9 is always seen as it's constantly called the cynical Star Trek. And well, I think that the plot here is pretty dark in terms of what Garak is up to. They always balance it out a little bit, and I think that that's Bashir's role, and that's why Bashir would be chosen as the character to play off of him a little bit here, because Bashir's point of view is this very Star Trek-y take on what Garak has done, and sort of trying to meet in the middle there between the two of them. And while Bashir is still kind of a doofus at this point in the series, I guess you could argue Bashir grows a little bit more than Garak does throughout the course of events here on some level.
Yeah, I mean, Garak, well, I guess it's up in the air, but there's no point where I think that's maybe a little bit part of the problem too, because it's like by the end he shows no change, but I guess he's not necessarily supposed to.
Yeah.
Because part of his character is the fact that he's just brushing everything off and basically pretending like it never happened. Like it's like he and Bashir went out drinking, and Garak got shit faced, and
that's
just started
got the headache.
It just started telling all these like deep, dark confessional stuff, and Bashir's sitting there listening, going like, "Wow, this is really going to change the tenor of our friendship." And then tomorrow, it's just like nothing ever happened.
Yeah,
and you still owe him $25 or whatever.
Yeah, it's that's interesting. I sort of fall in the middle. I like the episode, but I don't think it's a great episode. I think that its bottle nature really is problematic on some level, because it's an episode that's really built around telling and not showing you anything.
Yeah, that's where it was getting me, because by the time before they kind of give you the turn at the end and imply that everything he said is suspect, it felt to me like they just wanted to tell this one big story about Garak's background. And so it was just like every few minutes you would get another monologue about his past, which is why I think the part where he says you need to know the truth again, I was like, you couldn't figure out a more organic way to finish the story. Like, it just feels like, here's the beginning of the story, now here's the middle of the story, now we got to tell the end of the story. So it just felt like they were really ham-fisting their way into telling this story about Garak. Yeah. And once you find out that there's it's all kind of suspect, it kind of changes the way you look at it. But yeah, it felt so much like they just wanted to tell you and the story as opposed to showing you anything about him. But I think the interesting thing is that by him telling this story, they are showing you his character, because if he's not telling stuff that's explicitly just exposition. Yeah. Because it's so gray, and some of it's lies and some of it's probably truths. And regardless of whether or not it's true or false, he's still having this like mental breakdown. Yes. So they are showing you a lot about him. But it's covered by what seems like it's just telling you stuff.
Yeah, the most truthful thing you learn about it is that he does not like being on the station. Like, he's unhappy with his life at this point. Mm-hmm. Like that is undeniably true, because he's reacting most emotionally to that aspect of things.
He does mention having mediocre food. And I was thinking about that. And I was like, well, what it's one of those things like, would you trade replicator technology if the replicator food was just only okay? Like, you could create literally anything. You could create enough food to feed every single person on the planet, but it's fine. Yes. It's like you order a steak and it's like it's a little bit too cooked. Yep. Or you order like a turkey sandwich and the turkey's just like a little bit too dry.
Every drink is a little too watery. It's just it's just slightly unpleasant. You're just like, oh, it's too much ice. No, it's
even replicators can't get cappuccino exactly the way it should be. It's almost like, well, it depends on who programmed it, right? Like, if you bring someone in who doesn't know how to cook, and they just program everything in, and they put their own programmer stamp on everything, it's like, well, this guy apparently wasn't very good at making soufflés.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would probably be the ultimate experiment in like relative happiness. Like, if you brought that to a starving region, there'd be immediate sense of happiness, but then everyone started realizing that the food wasn't particularly good. It would be like, all right, now happiness has been brought back down to its happiness is determined on your like level relative to whatever your baseline is, whatever the sign shows there.
Yeah, you can have chocolate anytime you want, but it's always that like penny bin bargain garbage chocolate. That's like the ones that the little tiny wrapped Santa Clauses that are like the size of your thumb and taste like plastic.
Every marshmallow is the orange peanut marshmallow.
Yeah,
that's all.
I had another technology thought that I wanted to bring up because this is the first time this ever really occurred to me. I don't know why it occurred to me in this episode, never before. But don't you think it's kind of funny how the communicator as a concept is almost entirely used not to talk to people, but to summon people for a face-to-face talk?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's basically it's like a more invasive beeper.
Yes, yeah. Like you don't see people because it's part of the thing. I think it was the scene was Quark radios to, I can't remember who it was, if it was Bashir or somebody, and says, could you come down here and we have to talk about blah 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 blah. He's
when Garak's drunk, right? Is that when Garak's
He's like, all right, I'll be right there. It's like, so you didn't tell him what was happening. You just asked him. You basically called him on the phone to say, could you? It's like when someone texts you and says, call me.
Yeah.
You know? Or it's like, imagine any retail store where they, how they all have like headsets in now so they can communicate with each other.
Yeah.
It's like instead of that, they just have the old style where it's, we're at the top of the aisle 3, that kind of thing. It's basically the communicator technology is as advanced as a supermarket chain, basically.
There's nothing more annoying than the text that says "call me" either, because it's like it only implies bad things have happened. Like I always have to tell Amy to just you just got to give me a little bit of information just to let me know that everything is fine, and then I'll be able to call.
Also the voicemail. The voicemail that's just "call me back" is infuriating.
Yeah, it's important enough that they left a voicemail, but not important enough to tell you what's actually going on. The communicators, I think it's. It's obviously they should just end every single. Go ahead. No, they should just end every single thing with like can you come down here so that the cameras can capture it? Basically,
yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's what it's for. It's to set up scenes.
Yeah.
Can you ghost people through communicator? Like, I wonder what the dating scene is like when you have communicator badges where you can really if you could radio to literally anybody and they're going to hear it on the ship.
Yeah, everyone. We had there was a funny one an episode or two ago, where it actually happens in Whispers, the one with O'Brien as the replicant. Mm-hmm. O'Brien pages Kira or something, and Kira answers, and O'Brien's like, "Hey, I need to get in this room," and then Cisco gets in over Kira's communicator, and he's like, "Hey, Chief, get out of there." So you're never having a real private conversation. Someone can always just sort of hop onto the phone and tell you something that you don't want to hear.
I mean, honestly, maybe is that the answer for the future? Because I mean, as technology and communication technology, whether it's phones or texting or Twitter or whatever, becomes more advanced and more public, which means there's more people looking at it and even more people recording it. Is the answer to then turn back inside and only use that technology as a way to generate an analog conversation?
Yeah. Well, I guess the metaphor here would be when Garak gets drunk, right? He goes down to the bar and gets drunk, and Bashir, to sort of satiate him or whatever, is like, let's go back to your quarters and drink alone. So it's about pulling away from this giant bar scene, which is the communicator, and just going somewhere where there's no technology and you can be a Luddite. We'll close this with there's a lot of theorizing about the homoeroticism of the relationship here between these two.
Interesting.
Andy Robinson said that who plays Garak, said that he played Garak in his first couple of appearances as though he was homosexual, and the producers told him to tone it down.
I'll be honest with you. Everything I see that guy in, I feel like he's playing it as he's kind of gay.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as a knock or anything. He's just got something about his attitude where he's always seems to, even if he's yelling at someone, he seems to have a glimmer of love behind his eyes.
Yes, yeah.
Like even in Cobra, where he's the tough cop. I mean the tough chief trying to run down married Cobretti. Like there's something about it where he's like, Cobra, you're okay.
He does have a very effusive personality that comes across. Yeah,
he's great. He's really good.
I do think that when you watch their episodes together, it doesn't strike me as something that I'm like immediately picking up on. But when someone tells you about it and you watch it, you're like, they do have a very friendly relationship with each other in a way that it seems like it's more than friends on some level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it's just the sort of the error or something. I feel like a more modern production would sort of pick up on that. Discovery will definitely pick up on something like that. This is this is a better gay relationship than Discovery. They'll
pick up on it, make a big deal out of it in the press, and then abandon it 2 episodes later.
We'll talk about Discovery in the next episode. So we're going to wrap this one up.
Yes, we will.
We're going to wrap this one up. I'm going to take a break. We'll play an audio clip, and me and Clay are going to read some patron thoughts, and then we'll give our final thoughts.
Besides, you're the one who ordered him to put that implant in his head, aren't you?
I never had to order Garak to do anything. That's what made him special. So you're saying that if you don't get the information, Garak dies?
That's it.
Well, we can't allow that, can we? I'll see to it that all the necessary data is transferred to your station's computers.
Thank you.
Oh, don't thank me. I'm not doing Garak any favors. He doesn't deserve a quick death. On the contrary, I want him to live a long, miserable life. I want him to grow old on that station surrounded by people who hate him, knowing that he'll never come home again.
What a lovely sentiment.
And it's from the heart, I assure you.
All right, everybody. So if you support the show on patreon.com, you get to leave comments about upcoming episodes and they get read on the show. So we'll start going through these right now. Stephen Cobb writes, The Wire. Twist on addiction, that is good to see. The headache scenes in the cold opening were a bit cringe-inducing in how obvious the pantomiming was. Okay, now act like you have a headache and make it obvious in a way that no real person actually has a headache. Good relationship building with Bashir and Garak. As always, amazing performance by Garak, Andy Robinson. I can't decide if Bashir is playing Bashir's naivete really well or really bad. Whatever the case, it works well with Garak. Love the guest star Paul Dooley as Tane. He's so natural in the part and conveys the supreme comfort and confidence that you would expect of a powerful character to have. He's really one of the best guest stars on DS9 for its whole run. It's no wonder stories keep popping up that feature his character. Zam Nuclear Wessel writes, The Wire. Everything to love about Garak in a nutshell. Does the pastiche on the Killing Joke, and I think it actually surpasses it on the point of stories and lies being superior to the truth. Did you get any Killing Joke feelings from this, Clay? Talk about Batman Killing Joke for people who are unaware. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, except for that scene where the flashback to where Garak shoots Dax in the stomach and paralyzes him.
Yeah. Is that the Killing Joke, or is that that's actually
that's the one where Batgirl gets shot? I can see that.
It's really just about because that's one of the first stories that had the Joker be a mystery about where he came from, right?
Yeah, so not to go off on a tangent about the Killing Joke, but the question in the Killing Joke about whether or not the backstory you're getting is legitimate has always been difficult for me, because the Joker's not telling you that story. Alan Moore, the writer, is just showing you that story. So the Joker's not actively telling anybody his origin story,
right?
Which means that I feel like the idea that what you're being shown is not actually what happened in some way is a little bit more suspect.
Yeah, sure.
Because, who's lying to you in that situation,
Does the Joker not end that story by... Doesn't he have a line or something that he's like, I like multiple choice options or something? Does the Joker not acknowledge that what he... So if he's not narrating it, I guess I haven't read in a while. I don't know how he would wrap that line up.
Yeah, it's been a bit for me too.
Yeah.
The only thing that I really remember is that his whole point of what he's doing in the story is to prove that even the most righteous man is one bad day away from turning into the Joker, basically. Yeah,
right.
And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd have to go back and read whatever dialogue there is between him and Batman in the last fight or whatever. But yeah, I never got the impression that they were trying to pull one over on you on the legitimacy of that story. But maybe I'm completely wrong.
Oh, interesting.
Have you heard the theory that Batman actually kills the Joker at the end of that story?
No, is that something that's seen?
Yeah, I won't go into it. But if you're interested, look up. There's an interview that Kevin Smith did with Grant Morrison, who lays out exactly how he believes that Alan Moore actually very slyly has Batman break the Joker's neck at the end of the comic.
Yep.
It is kind of interesting. It's one of those things where it's like what you're reading into it is probably more than what is actually there, but it's a fun alternate reading of it.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I'll get that link from you and put it in the description. Let's go to the next one. Chad Wiley, The Wire. While his best moments are still to come, this episode is where Garak starts to cement his place as one of Star Trek's best characters. I love the constantly shifting backstory Garak gives himself, which fits his character very well. And Tane does a great job of presenting an air of amicable menace. He's super friendly and helpful, but you just know he could make you and your whole family disappear if he felt like it. Great performances all around. I do like the Tane performance because he turns very quickly. He goes from the friendly sort of host character to, once Bashir has sort of annoyed him, he is the light switch really flicks and he becomes very sinister sounding. It's a good performance. Joint Mango says, The Wire, Garak Gummin. That was probably the best Wire quote, Clay, I think. He just has 100% required viewing. Let's see here. Anyone else? Russ Graham, The Wire, an underrated episode that sometimes
you can skip season 5 though. Season 5 just is really like an alternate story as far as I'm concerned.
I like season 5.
It has its moments, but like season 4 just wrapped everything up so well.
Yeah.
That season 5, it's like McNulty's in a certain point where his character seems to have come full circle, but then in season 5 he's just back to doing the same shit he was doing in the first season, and it felt like that all around, you know.
Yeah.
And that serial killer plot was ridiculous.
Yeah, that was probably the most outrageous story that The Wire ever got in. That felt sort of unnatural on some level.
Especially after season 4, which was such like a down-to-earth, interesting... was the season 4 was the stuff with the teachers? Yeah, the kids. Yeah. I guess some of the stuff they were doing with the newspaper in season 5. Was that season 5?
That was 5 is the paper. That's where the whole he's playing the media to get them to publish the story so that they get funding for that police
some of that
department.
stuff was interesting, but that serial killer plot was no.
a little over the top. Well, now we look at our news on a daily basis and we're like, maybe it isn't all that much over the top.
Yeah, I know. I should go back and watch it. It probably seems quaint at this point.
Russ Graham says, an underrated episode that sometimes flies under the radar despite laying some major groundwork for one of Trek's most fascinating figures. Despite appearing in previous episodes, The Wire gives us our first thorough examination of Garak, and the back and forth between him and Bashir establishes a direction for both characters in future episodes. The sense of mystery surrounding Garak is heightened by the extent of his deceitful nature, while Bashir begins a gradual progression away from youthful naivete. There's a real opportunity here for Robinson to show his acting chops, and he doesn't let it go to waste. His expression of a broad range of extreme emotions is masterful. Looking back, this episode is a little rough around the edges, but it's still an impressive early showcase of what will become one of DS9's major strengths, its compelling characters. I give it a 4 out of 5, a personal favorite. And then Matthew Ross, The Wire, the ultimate Kaiser Sose episode on Garak, leaving you with more questions than answers and purposely frustrating. Garak is his dependable, creepy self with the vulnerability of a wounded man. Bashir is finally getting to show his ability to emote and roll his eyes. I tell you they need TV or some Game Boys while hanging around. I guess Pulaski just paced while Riker was in his clip show fever. The real question is why allow Bashir the keys to a runabout by himself? Papa Cisco is going to be mad. Eric Johnson, The Wire is the start of why Garak is one of my favorite DS9 characters. Garak has been established before this episode and is shifty, untrustworthy, what's really the truth nature, but this episode puts such a spotlight on him and shows how he survives in the world, eternally smiling on the outside while hurting on the inside, and using lies to tell the truth. He's like no one else in Star Trek, so we always want to see him. And lastly, Kyle Barrett says, The Wire, finally an episode where Bashir isn't just a friend to O'Brien. So what does he get to do? Oh, just to be a friend to Garak. When will Bashir get an episode about him? At some point in the show, he just seems to be a proxy character designed to help explore other more interesting characters. That being said, I really love this episode.
That happens in the next episode, too.
Yeah, the ambiguity of Garak's past, the twists and turns, and particularly Andrew Robinson's performance make this one of my favorite episodes. Other than a slightly rushed ending, I'd say it's as close to perfect episode of television objectively, and it makes great strides in bold storytelling DS9 will embrace.
I thought the lighting sucked, so objectively, it's destroyed.
That's true. It didn't...
Objectivity be damned.
It didn't go across the board. I'll go first, Clay. I have a hard time. I don't know if this is a 3 or 4. I'm going to give this a 3. Because I think that the really bodily nature of this is kind of a problem with this episode on some level. It's an episode that fans can really get into, and maybe when we finish the series, if you were to ever for some reason rewatch this one, you might see it a little bit differently than what you do now. But I think it's a very strong 3. I think it's a very good episode. I just don't know how watchable and how on its own it can stand on some level. So a 3 for me.
Yeah, I would say the same. I would say it's a 3, at least on first watch. It's a 3. Actually, I'll be honest with you. On first watch, up until you really kind of get an idea of what's going on, I would put it at a low 3. Okay. But that's not to say that there wasn't good stuff, going through it. But like I was saying before, I was trying to figure out like what the point of any of this actually was. Yeah. Other than to just kind of set up stuff that's going to come later. Yeah. But yeah, once you see everything and you kind of think about it a little bit, yeah, I'd say it's a 3. I would say it could be higher if you're really trying to get into like deep cut episodes. Yeah. Like this isn't one I would lead with. But if people watch like the 10 best or whatever to really get them into it and they wanted to dive a little deeper, I'd say, yeah, you should watch this one. It'll give you some good character insights and stuff like that.
Coming off the marquee, it's yet another episode that is almost deliberately moving away from sci-fi stuff. Yes. The show is really honing in on the fact that their sci-fi stories were terrible to start off, and they're realizing that they have to stay with the characters that they've built to this point, and that the sci-fi plotting doesn't seem to work in this setting as much. So that's the other takeaway from it, is that it's really un-TNG. Like this is an episode that having 2 stars of TNG having this interaction with each other would really not make a lot of sense. It wouldn't fit well with the ethos of that show. But I think it does here.
I was just going to say, I think it's tough. It would be tough to do this with TNG just because, as I said before, everything has to kind of reset at the end or end on a more unresolved note. Yeah.
And those characters are all pretty much open books because they are coming from the same system, basically. Like they're all from the same background, which is Starfleet or whatever.
Yeah. And, honestly, if you wanted to really get into it, you could probably do an episode like this with Guinan. Yeah. Because
she's a mystery.
Yeah, nobody knows anything about her. Who knows what she's done or has had to do up to this, to get where she is. Yep. Doesn't necessarily mean she's always been like this Zen-like saint person her entire life. She could have done some really awful shit. You never know.
I don't think she has a first name, so I couldn't have made up a story where she actually does something.
They never. Usually, with a character like that, they give you bits and pieces too, where it's like they'll be talking and she'll impart some sort of wisdom that starts with, "Well, back when I was a gun runner on Ducant 4 or something like that." Like they do a really good job with that in Buffy the Vampire Slayer with the character of Giles, where every now and then they'll drop in stuff about the fact that he used to be this like badass.
He was up to something.
Yeah. He was. His anybody that knows him from when he was younger calls him Ripper, which, in contrast to the character he plays on the like now in the present on the show, you just go, "Whoa, what?" Yeah, and every now and then, a little bit of Ripper comes out, and it's actually pretty great the way they handle it. That's a great show.
Very much a history of violence, the Viggo Mortensen type thing, right? Where
yeah,
you're just some guy slinging coffee until you need to stab a guy in the face with a fork or whatever.
Yeah, it's history of violence. If he was totally remembered everything that he was doing, yeah. Oh wait, sure. He does remember what he's doing in that movie, doesn't he? He just lies about it the whole movie.
He does. He's just a very good liar.
Yeah. Oh, that movie's great. I gotta watch that again.
Right. So, guys, that's it. We're both giving it a 3, but we'll see how things change. I like the episode. I just think it's a tough watch to sort of stand alone on its own. Anyway, if you want to support the show, you can go to social media. The Facebook and Twitter links will be in the description. You can go to patreon.com/thepensky file. That's the best way to support the show. A couple $1 a month, you get extra podcasts and the ability to vote on topics. You can leave your feedback, which we'll read on the show. And then Discord is the last one. If you go to Discord, it's like a little Skype Lite. Not Skype Lite. It's probably better than Skype, but it's a Skype sort of thing where there's a chat room. We talk about the episodes. We talk about Star Trek. We talk about the Avengers, talk about all the things that drive Clay away.
Well, now I've seen it. I can go back and I can look, but that was like a week ago, so I have to comb through a week's of...
Yeah, Discord's about staying up to date, I guess, with it, because if too much has passed, I'm not going to go back and read that. I'll just jump in here and say something uninformed. Let's see. I think that's it. Discord, Patreon, all the social media links. Clay, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think my non sequitur is going to be quick. It's the I have not seen a music video as good as Childish Gambino's "This Is America" in a very long time.
That was very good. Yeah.
I tweeted about it. I haven't seen I think the song is okay, but the song with the video is like a whole nother level.
Yeah. I'm constantly amazed that they still make music videos. Like,
I know. Yeah. They only exist on YouTube.
Excuse me. Yeah, I guess it makes more sense now than it used to. There was a period like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago where it just seemed like there was no point in doing it at all. But now that I think back in that gray area before digital streaming really just murdered the music industry, there was still, it didn't seem like videos mattered anymore because there was all these other things that were happening. But now that they basically they don't have any other options really for getting your stuff out there the way that videos. I should say, not that they don't have options, but streaming video is such a easy thing to do now that it makes perfect sense that you would do music videos, as much as you did back in the 90s.
And a shocking, maybe not shocking, but a huge proportion of YouTube total views are just people listening to music on it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, as great as like Spotify is or something, if I want to listen to an album and not have, I know what my non sequitur is going to be. I'll get to that in a second. But if I want to listen to an album of music without interruptions or stuff, you can do that on YouTube all day, pretty much.
Yep.
But yeah, I loved his last album, and I didn't really like I was never really a fan of his when he was doing more straight hip hop. But the two songs that I've heard from this upcoming thing, it seems like he's really managed to blend the two styles he was playing with really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's really impressive.
Yeah, it's good. I'll just wrap it up with, I think that YouTube, like, making music videos actually now feels like it has more of a positive angle than back in almost even the heyday of MTV. Maybe that's going back too far, but like what you've realized now is that you're not competing to get your video aired on MTV, really. You're just making it and your fans will watch it and potentially it could go viral at some point. So you're not in this, I remember watching MTV and you'd watch it after school or whatever, and it would just be the same 10, 15 videos, like endlessly on a loop. So you needed to crack into those videos, that loop that they were playing. And you don't really need to do that anymore. You just need to put it on YouTube. You get a ton of views, make some money off of it, and spread the brand or whatever.
Well, honestly, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, the biggest change, I think, in the last 15 years as far as music videos go is they used to just be straight up ads. They were just ads. So it would be the musician doing something stupid, lip syncing their song, and they were just pumped out. And now you have to kind of be a little more clever if you want people to watch it.
Yep.
And I'm kind of surprised that, MTV apparently doesn't care, but I'm surprised no one has stepped in and created sort of like a curated music video streaming channel.
I mean, the sort of like VH1/7, like once you start getting those cable packages that have like all like 20 VH1 channels, you start to run into those kind of channels. They're just not popular, I guess.
Well, I'm the best channel I ever watched in my whole life was VH1 Classic. They had the best shit ever. But I'm talking like take the modern streaming idea and the idea that people are watching webisodes and just all sorts of different content and apply that to music videos. So are you
thinking like a Pandora for video, basically?
Yeah, I'm thinking like a curated collection. So it's basically like the best of the best videos, right?
Oh, I see.
So you've got all of these really interesting videos that people either talking about or think that there is some sort of artistic merit to all in one place, which doing that in and of itself instantly makes them more important, even if they're not.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess my thought is basically that I'm surprised MTV or someone like MTV has not taken a step into what seems to be a really open field as far as the potential of music videos on the internet is.
Interesting. We're running long. Do you want to save your non sequitur for the next episode, or does it tie into this?
It ties in a little bit. I'll be quick. So
right,
I sign up for the Spotify Premium only when there's like one of those things where it's like $10 for 3 months or something because I'm a cheap bastard.
Sure.
And so I recently just canceled my subscription, and I feel like they were trolling me pretty hard because as soon as I canceled, all the ads that I started getting were just erectile dysfunction and hair loss ads.
Yep.
Or ads for the keyboard player from Journey's book about God. And I was like, oh, man, you're really making a good case for me to sign back up to this thing.
This limp-dicked motherfucker over here. We gotta get him back. It's hostile targeted advertising, I think, is where the big money is in the future.
It's targeted advertising in general just drives me nuts because it's like there's so many things that require ads, and there are apparently not enough ads to go around. So if you watch anything that has ads in it, you're seeing the same commercial like 15 times. So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so anytime I like to catch up on the CW DC comic shows like in chunks. And on the CW app, it's like the same 4 commercials for every single show. So it's really made sure that I'm never going to buy any of the products they're trying to sell me.
I signed up for, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I just signed up for I signed up a little while ago for YouTube Red, which is basically you pay $10, you get no ads, and you get, it's basically their Spotify service, and you can watch their standalone content and things like that. There's a whole bunch of perks to getting it.
I would do it just to watch that Karate Kid show. That looks pretty funny.
Well, the thing is, I don't use it for any of the perks except for the ad thing. And before I got it, I was like, YouTube ads, they're kind of annoying, but whatever, I can do it. Now, whenever I log into like Amy's computer and use it, and she doesn't have YouTube Red, so I go to her, it just logs into her account. It's like, why are there so many ads? What is happening? I need this to stop. It's really remarkable how quickly it changed me from like, I can't stand YouTube with ads at this point. I'll gladly pay $10 a month to not have any.
Yeah. Remember when YouTube didn't have any ads?
Yes. Back in 2005 or whenever it actually came out. There were the same 3 cat videos that you could watch endlessly. Yeah. That's how they were. If someone had made a curated list of the best cat videos, I would probably watch that.
There was some good shit on there in the early days. Like back before people realized what was going on, you could find some like deep cut, especially music. So I mean, apparently you can find live concerts for everybody who's ever played anywhere now on YouTube, and nobody cares. But there was like music videos and stuff that you haven't seen in years that some of them I think have been taken off because of copyright stuff. So you could find some good stuff in the early days.
Guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. As always, the Captain Tier patrons on Patreon get a shout out. Vincent Adolman, Stephen Cobb, Russ Graham, Eric Johnson, Nathan Elliott, Ewan Tibbetts, Decker Sebastiani, Neil Brennan, Carrie Mobility, Doug Valcamp, Michael Pond, Bradley Killens, Rune Vendler, Jace Stanley, Mike Burnett, Matthew Ross, Ben Douglas, Kyle Barrett, Joint Mango, Tarek Latif. Guys, thank you very much for supporting the show. Clay, thanks very much, and you'll be back with a crossover in a couple of days. Hell yeah. All right, so thank you very much, guys. We will see you next time.